I stop sharing, then you stop sharing. Welcome everyone to English Without Borders, a weekly Thursday webinar series. We are delighted to have such a fantastic webinar today at 6 p.m. Tajikistan time, with attendees joining us via both Facebook and Zoom. In today's webinar, we will be exploring the topic of enhancing the online science lab experience. Our esteemed speaker will be providing invaluable insights and actionable tips for you, dear audience. Before giving the floor to our 100th speaker, I would like to introduce her to you. Veronica Giese earned a bachelor degree in biology with a minor in chemistry. Not sure what to do with her degree, she went back to school to earn her teaching license. That was 19 years ago, and she has taught high school science students ever since. 11 of those years have been in-person teaching, while 8 years have been online at Bridges Virtual Academy. Veronica has taught physical science, biology, chemistry, honors chemistry, and variety of science special education classes during this time. She has served as science department head, chemical safety manager, and 4K-12 science professional learning community coordinator at some point through these years. Personally, she is a wife and mother of 3 children. She loves the great outdoors and being in the kitchen, trying a new recipe. So welcome, dear all, dear participants who have joined us. And now the floor is yours, dear Veronica. Please, you can start. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It is nice to be here. I have been a science teacher for a while now, and I would love to share what I have learned in the virtual setting that has made the science experience a success for my students. So before I go any further, I am going to share a link with you in the chat. And that is going to get you into my presentation. So there it is in the chat. So during my presentation, please, that is a program called Nearpod. So you can stay in that program. You do not need to be on my screen. And I will talk and walk you through my presentation in that way. So I will wait for people to get into the presentation using the link in the chat. Is the link working that is allowing people to get into Nearpod? Oh, I have a few people coming in. I will wait.
Yes, I have already joined. Yes, it is working.
I have two participants in the Nearpod, so I'm wondering if people are using that link to get into the Nearpod.
Yeah, dear participants, could you please go to this link and use the link in order to go to the presentation, please? So here is it in the chat box.
Gulnora, sorry, I just joined. I don't see the link. Can you please send it again?
Oh, it is in the chat box. Yes.
Yeah, I looked in the chat box.
Okay. I will
I put it in
send
there again.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, I understand.
I will wait maybe one more minute just to make sure everyone can get in if they would like, and then I will move on.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I will move on. So for my presentation, I have broken it into two sections, really. One, I will talk about science experiments and how I have set those up in my virtual classroom to make them a success for students. And then my second topic, I will cover STEM, which is a large topic in the science field. And then lastly, we'll have question and answers. I thought it would be neat to see who we have in the audience today. So if you have joined my presentation using the Nearpod link, you should be able to take my poll question right now. And it says, how many years have you been in education? So if you're not in Nearpod, but you're in the Zoom, you could also chat your answer in the chat box right now. So again, the question is, how many years have you been in education? So please share if you are able. This program that I'm using called Nearpod is actually really nice when I'm teaching in the science classroom. Not only can I show my presentation slides, what I'm trying to teach for the day, but it also has embedded participation, like this poll question, for example. And I have a few others throughout my presentation where I can engage my audience and have them participate and get some feedback as we are going through the meeting or in the students when we're going through class. So it looks like we have a good mix of different years of being in education. My hope is that today I give you at least one piece of information that is helpful to you. So beginning with science experiments. When I moved into a virtual online classroom, I had to change some of the things that I was doing compared to when I was in an actual building. So one of those strategies was to get a science kit for students. So it has maybe 17 to 20 different science experiments that pertain to the class that we're teaching that year. And I found that I couldn't just give my student that lab because they weren't going to be successful. So I came up with a strategy, and I'll talk about that on how to make that science kit an effective tool. I understand also that sometimes science kits or at-home resources are not available. And so there are those online simulations that are also a wonderful resource if that hands-on experience isn't available. This four-step process is something that I came up with as I was beginning those first years in a virtual classroom. And so I had this nice lab kit that was ordered. But like I said, if you just give a student a lab and say, here, do it, they're going to get lost. They're not going to be confident in themselves. And they most likely will have a negative or a bad experience. And so this is my four-step process. First, we pre-lab. So before they can even get to do the lab, we have to look at it. And then after that, we've made sense of what's going to happen in our lab. Then they will complete the lab. Then we'll come back and analyze and discuss. And then finally, they'll have a post-lab test. So in a little more detail, for the pre-lab option is to get them to read the manual, read the procedure first, get a sense of what they have to do. Look at the lab equipment. Do they know how to use it? Do they even know what it is? As a science teacher, you take some of that stuff for granted. But to a student, this is the first time, their first experience. And so we have to, I found that you break it down. The more you break it down, the better it is for the student. So there's two ways that I typically do this. Over on the left is a picture of a Google form. And so I'll set up a series of questions in my Google form, and it just makes their questions right from the lab manual, and it gets them to read through that again, look at that procedure, read the background information, so they have a sense of what this lab is going to be all about. Then when we come back as a class, we can have a discussion about anything that they saw in there that they did not understand. Another option is over here on the right. I call that a help document. It's there to help the student. When I assign labs, it's usually homework that they do on their own. And so I found, like in my chemistry class, so that's upper level students, I might use the help document more often. And so I'll put a lot of resource materials in there that will help them understand maybe some of the vocabulary, or I'll give them pictures to illustrate a concept. I will complete the lab myself, and I'll go through it, picking out areas where I know students will struggle. And I'll mention that in my help document here. And I'll try to just outline everything possible that I think would be helpful for them. Also math, if there are some math formulas needed to complete the lab, I will put that in the help document for struggling students with math. I might even put in a video link or a small tutorial that I made for myself to show them what it means, what the manual is trying to say. I have found that these pre-lab options actually are very helpful and good because it brings about a conversation with the students that we would not have had otherwise. And then again, it's just setting them up for success in the lab. So after that, then they actually complete the lab. And like I said, I typically assign it for homework. Sometimes we'll do the lab together in class. And then also something is important is students are very concerned if they get a right or wrong answer. And sometimes they're so worried about getting it right that they just lose out on the lab experience itself. So when they complete the lab, I emphasize that you are trying it, you're exploring it, you're trying to make sense on their own. And for them to know that they're not graded for right or wrong, it kind of just lets off some of the stress. And then they can just enjoy or really be curious about the lab rather than worrying about whether they get it right or wrong. So that is step 2. Step 3, we'll come back as a class and then we'll talk about it and analyze the data. For me, step 3 here is the most important or the most rich experience out of the lab. Because if you think about it, when a student does a lab at home, there's many things that could go wrong. You're not there to help or control. And, think about all the students that you have in your class. And so coming back as a class and discussing it together is super important for these reasons. We get to ask questions. We get to clarify what happened versus what should have happened. We look at lab data together. I always tell them my data does not need to be your data. We do not need to have exact numbers, but rather we look at trends or patterns. If data goes up, everyone's data should have gone up regardless of what the number was. So we look for those trends and patterns. And if they have those trends, if they got that pattern, then we call that a success because it looks like their lab turned out pretty well. And if their lab did not turn out well, we talk about that too. And we, again, make sense of what should have happened and we get things clarified so students have a chance to figure it out and make sure that they understand what they were supposed to get from the lab. So again, this step here, I think, is very important. The last step is that post-lab, I call it a test or a quiz. So at this point, we've gone through the pre-lab, the lab, the analysis, and then finally, this is the end of it. So in the post-lab, it's an assignment that is graded for right or wrong, because at this point, they should have a pretty good understanding of the lab. And so I've got 2 pictures here. The one on the left is maybe for the post-lab, it's a series of questions that they have to answer in short sentence form. Or I've also on the right side have done Google Forms. Google Forms are a very nice way to have multiple choice or short answer questions in the post lab. And then all the students know that by the time we get to the post lab, they know that these are being graded for right or wrong. So in that 4-step process, if you do that for every lab out of the lab kit, or whatever you are making for your students, they begin to understand the process. And as they become more comfortable with that process, the lab experience becomes more successful and they feel more confident in themselves when they have to do those kinds of assignments. The other strategy are online simulations. Which I have been using more and more because honestly, over the last couple of years, I feel that they've really come a long way with science simulations. There's a lot of science materials out there online, but it's for a teacher. I spend a lot of time looking through and making sure I find the really good ones for my students. So these are ones that I have used or that I do use right now. So there's an online program that is free called PhET. That stands for Physics Education Technology. And it's not just physics. They also have biology or environmental science in there. The really nice thing about the PhET simulations over there on the left is that they have a nice teacher resource page for every single simulation. So as the teacher, before I would assign that simulation, there is a tutorial there for me, some short videos. There are even some homework worksheets or documents that other teachers have created that have shared those in the PhET program. And so I always know that I can go into the PhET online program and always be in really good support as the teacher to find something that will work for my students. And then way over here on the right, there's a new program called Lab Exchange. That is also for free. Has any kind of science topic you could imagine. Over 20,000 free resources, and it's a variety of resources, labs, reading material, videos, simulations. It's very, very nice. So I would suggest as a teacher that could be a really helpful, reliable resource. And then the last one is called Smart Science. And that is something that as a school, it would need to be paid for by a subscription. But the nice thing about Smart Science is that it's a real lab that has been inputted into their program to make it in a simulation style. And so it's real world experiments where the students can manipulate the variables, and they can also have a good experience trying to analyze and figure out the science concepts. And so that's another option in a virtual school if science kits or at-home materials are not available. So if you are in the Nearpod program, you should be able to share a strategy that you have used for successful hands-on experiences for students. So if you are in Zoom, you could also share in the chat. Let's hear from you. What is a strategy that you have used in your science classroom, perhaps, or you've seen something that you've really liked that was a good, positive experience for students? So I'll pause and let you share if you would like. Again, if you'd like to share in Nearpod or in the Zoom chat, strategies that you have used or seen that was a successful experience for students. I feel as a science teacher, we always have to be creative and sometimes think outside of the standard box in order to come up with ideas that would work in a virtual classroom. So up on the screen, we've got a couple, thank you. Role playing in real life scenarios. I like that, that's a great idea. Debates and arguments about relevant topics. That would really engage them. Projects that involve research, absolutely. Things that they're interested in. Getting to interview from the older people in their community, very nice. Those all sound like rich experiences. Here's another one. Field trips. Yes, don't forget field trips. Wonderful. Virtual or in person, right? Now we can get field trips both ways. Anybody else before I move on? Role playing, pointing to objects while learning them, absolutely. Demonstrative pronouns, yes. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. The last thing that I would like to share in this section is a document camera. This is in the picture, it's that white thing that is hooked up to my laptop. And so it will project, it's a little camera up there on the top, and it will project on my computer screen whatever is down below. Can I share the link one more time? Sure. There it is in the chat. As a science teacher, this document camera has let me do extra things that I couldn't necessarily do on my computer screen. So, for example, I sometimes I like to model something from the lab experience. For example, I can show them, I can manipulate that with my hands, and I can show them that underneath the document camera. We can read together out of a book. We can do some of those modeling labs together. And then also in chemistry, when we get to all of that math that we have to do and those equations, it's a lot easier just to put a piece of paper underneath that document camera, and I can show them by hand the math and how to manipulate the equation in order to solve. Yes, you can do it on a screen, but I have found that sometimes it is nice just to show them by hand. So you can imagine there's many ways that you could use a document camera like that in your classroom. And it's just another way to connect and show students things that you may not would have had if you didn't have it. The other topic that I said I would talk about is STEM, which comes up a lot in science. So there are two large-scale projects that I have my students do throughout the science year. And one of them is a true science experiment, meaning they have to come up with the question, they have to plan the procedure, they need to come up with the hypothesis, the variables, they have to execute it on their own. It's different than if I said, here, do this lab out of this kit. It already tells you what to do. But here in this STEM project, they are doing it for themselves. And for some students, that's a real struggle, but it's a great opportunity for them to get in there and do science for themselves. I take 9 weeks to go from start to finish. So it's a very long process, but I feel that it's valuable. Of course, you could modify that to a different time frame. But one of the first things that I have them do to engage them is for them to pick between 2 topic sets. As a teacher, and I might have 40 students in my classroom, I cannot let everybody do just whatever they want. That would be a nightmare on my end for the teacher. So typically I have 2 different sets. So one set might be circuits and magnets, and another one might be light and lenses. And so between those 2 topics, they get to choose which one they would like to focus on. So by doing that, hopefully that engages them a little bit more than being told this is what you have to do. And then from there, since this is a very large project, I break it down week by week with assignments, things that they should be doing to move along. So by the time the deadline is there, they will have met the goal. I've done that for about 5 years now, and it's a pretty smooth process. Compared to that very first year when I did it. So on this screen, here are some pictures of the different assignments that I have them fill out along the way. First one is the proposal. So they need to outline the hypothesis, their variables. They have to show me that they know what they're doing. And yes, they do need to get it approved. And so I want to make sure as the teacher, they're going to be successful, they're doing it correctly, and they picked something that they can actually be able to do at home. So that is a bit of a headache on the teacher part, but once they have this approved, they really are going to be in good shape to be successful. Another thing that I have them do is after they run their experiment and run their trials, They have to take their data and put it into a spreadsheet. And then from the spreadsheet, they have to create a graph or a chart of some sort that illustrates their data. And then they have to analyze that. And that's very rich, good experience because a lot of them struggle with that, making the connection and understanding what they're seeing from their own experiment. And so that is a wonderful thing to make them or have them do. Also, part of STEM, there are those cross-cutting concepts like patterns, stability and change, structure and function, some of those large science ideas. So it's really easy to incorporate some of those analysis questions into their experiment, depending upon what they did. So as a teacher, that's just another way to bring in science literacy into their experiment. And then finally, at the very end, to showcase their hard work, we create or they create a presentation. So there's two parts to that. Number one, they have to create a slideshow. They have to create a presentation that shows their experiment from start to finish. So I tell them, they're telling us their story about what happened and how it came to be for their science experiment. And then after they create their presentation, they have to make a video of themselves. So they have to record themselves, kind of like using Zoom or a different kind of program to capture that. They have to have their camera on. They need to be speaking. So it's a good speaking opportunity for them. And while they're doing that, they are showing their presentation and they're explaining that whole process to their audience in the video that they make. And so, of course, I have an outline of criteria and things that they have to do, things that they should not do in order to streamline that process. Most of them enjoy it after they understand what they need to do. So that was an example of STEM using the scientific method. So now on my screen, if you're in Nearpod, this is called a Draw It slide. So that means down on the bottom, you have some tools like a crayon, an eraser, a text box option. And this is a question I might ask my students in my virtual classroom. And I'll say, okay, if you had to create a machine that could complete one of these tasks, what would you want your machine to do? And so there's a long list here. And so in the directions here in Nearpod, it says, pick your top 3 choices. So you could do that right now if you would like, if you're in Nearpod. If you're in Zoom, you could just tell me in the chat. But what would be your top 3 choices? 1 being your favorite, and then 2 and 3. Which of these would interest you to create a machine that could actually carry out that task? So why don't you go ahead and do that if you would like to participate. And while you're doing that, I'll explain that this is something that I do for another STEM experience, and it's called a Rube Goldberg machine. So you create this extravagant machine to complete a very simple task, like some of the choices up on the screen here. And so to engage the students and get them involved, they, as a class, decide what that task is going to be. Again, as a teacher, I cannot have 40 students doing 40 different things. It would be very difficult. So using class input and voting, we as a class come up with the top few choices and decide which one. I think we usually do 2 or 3. And out of those top choices, a student can choose from one of those. And so sometimes I do this once and then we get the top 5 and then we vote again to get the top 2 or 3. And it really creates a buzz. It's funny. They get very interested in picking out a choice. So thank you for trying that. So this would be for an engineering project. And so they, like I said, would create a Rube Goldberg invention. And then as a class, they get to choose between the top 2 or 3 choices. It depends how many good ideas we had for that school year. And of course, this is not 9 weeks. This is maybe a 3 or 4 week process. But again, week by week, as the teacher, I'm breaking down the assignments and the tasks that need to get completed in order to move along in that project. And so, like I said, we follow the engineering process, similar but a little bit different than the scientific method. And of course, they have criteria that they must include in their invention. And as you can imagine, it's really neat at the very end to see all the different inventions that they create at home and how a lot of them will choose, for example, to pop a balloon, but every single one of them is a completely different invention in order to get the balloon to pop, for example. So it's a really neat way to just show student creativity and all the many different ideas students can come up with to complete the same task. After that, I wanted to showcase the communication, which is a big part of the engineering process. And so, like I said, I have a class of about 40 students. And when they're done creating their invention and they get it to work, they do have to take a video of it. So we need to capture that it was successful, that they completed it, and that they can share it with other people. So they take a video of their Rube Goldberg invention. And what I do here on my end as the teacher, I might create a Google document and I put students in a row of 4 or 5 other students, and they become a group. It would be impossible to have all the students watch all of the videos. So I put them into groups and they are responsible to watch those 4 or 5 videos about the people in their group. So they get to see some other inventions. They're welcome to look at other ones, but those in their row, in their group, they are responsible to watch. Then after that, create a Google sheet that has those students' names in there. And across the top, they have to give some written feedback to the student. So what is one thing they did well? What is something they could have done better? How much time and effort do you think they put into their invention? So on and so forth. It's just another line of communication and feedback other than the teacher, right? They get this feedback from their peers. And that is helpful just as much as if it came from the teacher. There are other online programs you might be familiar with, like Flip or Padlet. Those are resources that you can have students use to record and share feedback with one another. So there are options as a teacher of how you would want or let your students communicate with each other in that type of a scenario. And then this slide is, I just gave you 2 very large project examples, but definitely you can incorporate STEM into smaller ways. So on this screen, there are 4 circles here showing you different ideas that I have used to incorporate STEM or increase student proficiency in reading and analyzing science. Because as a science teacher, we understand that that's a different type of reading and understanding compared to a different type of a class. So the first one here is STEM writing, which are, it says here, STEM writing prompts from those cross-cutting concepts. So the cross-cutting concepts are things here in this white box: patterns, cause and effect, systems and models, energy and matter, etc. Really large ideas in science classes. And so down below in the bullet points are examples of some STEM prompts. So maybe it was a lab experience, maybe it was a teacher demonstration, something that they saw or manipulated in science class, and now you want them to write about it. And so incorporating or bringing in some of these writing prompts is a great way to take them to that next level and make them engage and really try to dig deep and understand what they just saw or did. Another thing that I've done is I call it digging deeper, where they are simply reading graph data, they're analyzing it. So they did not do it themselves, they did not run the experiment, but they are simply at the point where they're analyzing the data and they have to make sense of it. And sometimes that's a struggle for students. And so that's a great skill for them to help them improve upon. Small group tasks, puzzles, questions, escape rooms. You could incorporate any one of those into a STEM skill if you wanted for your students. And then the last one is science phenomenon. And so that picture there is of a mimosa plant. And as you might know, when you just gently touch the leaves on that mimosa plant, they shut up and they close very quickly, and it's very alluring to watch. And so that would be an example of some science phenomenon. Or maybe it's a volcano erupting, or it's a glacier breaking in half. So just something very engaging and interesting for the students to look at. And it kind of hooks them in and it captures their attention. And so that's science phenomenon. So incorporating more of that, and then maybe even building your curriculum around that science phenomenon in order for them to stay motivated and curious about that. And then you can build all of the science facts and information from that unit based around that phenomenon. So just another creative way to bring their everyday world around them, right? Because that's what science does anyway. We try to understand the world around us. And so that's just another really nice example on how to do that. So those are examples of incorporating STEM in a smaller scale. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. And now I guess it's question and answer time.
Yeah, dear audience, please, if you have any questions, please, you can unmute yourself or you can write in the chat box. So for now, there is a question from me. What are some quick and easy ways to assess student understanding and engagement during online science experiments?
A way to engage them is to maybe have them lead. I found that that is helpful, that sometimes they are the teacher, so to speak. Sometimes that works. Or maybe to pause in the middle of an experiment, if it's possible, and ask the class, why are we doing this, or what would be the purpose of that, if you wanted that immediate conversation. Sometimes at the end of it, we call it like an exit ticket. So if they were paying attention and listening through that experience, then at the end, you pose a question to them, a ticket question. Before they get to leave, they have to answer that. And then as the teacher, you can kind of go through them and see, okay, these are the kids who got it. These are the kids who are still struggling. And then you can do something about it.
Thank you so much. We have some more questions here from Facebook. It says that beyond technology, what teaching strategies did you employ to encourage active participation, and real-time feedback in online labs?
Things that I have tried and maybe not always successful is to have them work together in small groups. Sometimes that's a strategy that is helpful. Another strategy is to have them do a little bit of their own background, some of their own background research, I guess you would say, before they would complete the lab. So while they were actually doing the lab, they could make better sense of that. If they have somebody at home who could help them, or that I found that at home help from an older sibling or a parent or guardian, sometimes that is very helpful. Otherwise, I might just open up my Zoom room and be there for help. And so if students want to show up for extra help or support while they're completing their lab, they could do that too.
Okay, thank you so much. And the second question, what advice would you offer to other educators interested in implementing online classes? Are there specific best practices or pitfalls to avoid?
Well, absolutely, yes. My advice as an educator, if you're trying to create a new online class of any sort, is to get other people involved who are on the same interest level as you to provide a meaningful experience for students. Having learning targets or learning goals, what is the outcome? Know what your outcome is, and then you can work towards that rather than just saying, we're going to create a class and see how it goes. I think you also need to be able to or be willing to take risks and fail. Not everything that I have tried over the years has been a success, but then you learn what doesn't work just as much as what does work. So being confident in yourselves that you can try those things and transition as you need to in order to figure out about what does work.
Okay, and the next question is that how might online spaces facilitate project-based learning and authentic language use?
I know that at BVA, we do have some classes that are project-based learning, not in science. So I myself have not done much of that. But again, it is possible, project-based learning, and it can be a success in an online environment. The student is paired with a teacher who is knowledgeable in that area. And as the teacher, they have those outline standards or expectations, things that you expect the students to learn and showcase their mastery at the end of each unit. And then the other thing is, sometimes when you go online, there's too many resources. And as a student, you might struggle with knowing where to go or how to find information. And so I think as the teacher, you would want to guide or set up some type of a process for the students when they're doing their research in those project-based environments in order to help them understand the do's and don'ts of that. So typically by the time they get to their project, there is a process to follow. You have an outline for them. What are your expectations? And then and also having that communication with the student, not just letting them go and do it, but checking in with them and answering questions and having that contact with them. It builds their confidence, and it also, as the teacher, if they are on the right path or not.
Yeah, thank you so much. And there is another question from Mavluda Zulfova. She asks, what are the main challenges that students face in STEM classroom activities?
Quite honestly, it's their confidence that they are able to, they see something posed to them and they often get very overwhelmed, and then they kind of just shut down or they give up before they even tried. I think that's their largest challenge. So as the teacher kind of, you know, cheering them on and building their confidence and reassuring them that, yes, you can do this. It's one step at a time, and modeling that for the student to show them that, you know, they can do that too, but they need to have that that perseverance, if you will, to stick with it, even though it might be challenging, that they can't just give up. Once they overcome that, I find that even the most challenged students can have some success in a STEM environment. But again, it's that mental thing with themselves about that they are able. Once they can overcome that, they're usually in pretty good shape.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we have another question left here from our very active member, Selbar Bukiva. What skills will be mostly improved while using Science Lab?
So I think if I understand the question, what's the biggest skill students learn if they are involved in science labs? And I think that there's a few of them. Number one, they build their confidence that they are able to complete such tasks, kind of for the same reasons that the previous question I just answered. It also gives them that opportunity to use some simple lab equipment from the kit and allow them to manipulate that and learn how to measure and use that in an effective way. That's another skill. And then analyzing their data. You know, this is my data set. What does it mean? What am I supposed to do with it? So then there's that another skill about that analysis and concluding and deciding, what is my data trying to tell me? For me, I call that science literacy. It's just thinking, reading, and writing in a science with a science focus, which might be different. But those are at least three valuable skills that I think students gain when they have either a lab experience, or even those simulations. Those can be very challenging and rewarding as well. So those simulations are very impactful, I think, as well.
Okay, one more question. Can I ask Miss Veronica?
Yes, please.
Hello.
Hello, Dilfuza. Yes, please.
As I also, science and math in English group. Can you hear me?
Your voice is
Hello?
broken. Yes, Dilfuza, we can't hear you fully. Yeah, your voice is breaking.
What about what now?
Yeah,
Is it
yeah,
okay?
yes, yeah. Please try.
As I teach, yes, I also teach science and math in English group for secondary grades. It's very hard for me to explain them in English. Is it then first in native as Tajik, then translating?
Oh, we have lost her.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was understanding up to the point where she blacked out.
Yeah, she has bad internet connection, but she's one of the most active member who is living very far in the remote areas.
Okay.
So, she's back. She's back again. Yes, Dilfuza, do you hear us? No, her internet is not stable. Yeah.
Oh, if she would like to email me her question, I would be happy to answer her that way.
I will let her know. Yes,
Yes.
definitely. I will let her know. So we have another question. Looking ahead, how do you envision the future of online labs and online English classrooms? What innovations in pedagogy might shape the next generation of engaging and effective online learning experiences?
That is a very heavy question, but a good one. The one thing that came to mind is a webinar that I watched this past fall, so not too long ago, and it talked about, well, at least in America, we are so focused on grades and getting the right grade. And that does lose the value of just learning for the sake or the curiosity. And so I would like to see in pedagogy is where we do have this shift where it has been done and it is successful, but you need everyone to be on board with it, where there are no longer grades, but instead the student has portfolios. And I think that that is something where they are, well, in a portfolio, you keep your best examples of your work in all of your different subject areas. We often see that in art, right? In art, you might have a portfolio of your best work. Well, in school, you can have a portfolio of your best work in all of your different classes. And you work with a mentor. So yes, you have teachers teaching you your classes, but you're also assigned to like a mentor or an advisor. And that you work with them and you build this rapport and this relationship where you help that student overcome their challenges, and you connect their curiosity and interest to what they're learning in the classroom. That alone would revolutionize how school goes because the focus is on that student and their learning versus what letter grade do I get at the end of the class. So I think online that's possible as well. You know, we do some of those kinds of things at BVA. Maybe not myself personally, but I know of other teachers who are incorporating or trying out some of those things, and they have made success in doing that. It just takes time. And like I said before, some things don't work. So admit that there's failures, but learn from that and keep trying to find a solution to what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Veronica. And Dilfuza is again back. So Dilfuza, if you can hear us, you can unmute yourself or you can write it in the chat box.
Yeah, if you can hear, it's better, I will say. Is it okay now?
Okay, yes, yes.
Yeah, I would like to ask, as I teach science and math in English groups for grade second, I try to explain them science and math in English, but it's very hard for them to understand. Is it possible if I will explain them in native language as in Tajik, then translate into English?
Are you asking me if I think that's a good idea?
Yeah. Is it a good idea or not?
Oh, yes, I think so. Yes, because you're meeting the student where they are. And so teaching them that in their native language, I think is a good place to start. But then as the teacher, you need to have some strategies in order to transition that over into English. If that's also one of your goals, is for them to understand it in English as well. One thing that came to mind, you know, you're teaching smaller children, second and third grade. I think that pictures are very powerful. So anytime, like when you're teaching a math or a science concept and the words might be a struggle, try to show them the same thing, but in a picture that you have found or in an illustration. And sometimes that connection, it really helps the student understand what you're trying to show them.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, finally, Dilfuza, you have You have
Yes,
got
I
the
hope
answer. Yes,
my
thank you so
turn. Yeah,
much. Yes.
you're welcome.
So, and dear all, thank you so much for your active participation and for your answering the question and your interest in the webinar. Thank you so much. And dear Veronica Giese, a huge thanks to you for doing this amazing, fantastic webinar for us.
you.
And we are looking forward to having more webinars like this in the future.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.